Lolly's Creamery Chocolate Cheesecake. All right, guys, so a lot to say about this one. Where should I start? First off, I must admit, this pint is quite old. If there's any texture issues going on here, I will not hold it against Lolly's. Y'all know the story. COVID had me out for a while. Last year was a big year for the review game. I'm trying to catch up. Nonetheless, we're digging into an old pint. I don't want to hear your complaints. This one's from March 2020. What's that? 14 months? March, April, May, maybe 15 months if I'm doing math correctly. Nonetheless, we're digging in and we have a salty chocolate ice cream, chocolate mousse, cheesecake chunks, and Oreo crust pieces. So right off the bat here you can see obviously the salty chocolate base, you can see the lighter cheesecake chunks. This is like the graham crust to it, and then I don't know if you can see the lighter stuff here, but there's definitely some Oreo crust pieces there. The mousse is kind of around the edges. It's almost like a swirl. We'll get there though. Just hold your horses. Here's one issue that is it's why I don't eat cheesecake. I'm not a big cheesecake fan in general. Why I don't eat chocolate cheesecake. Chocolate's just too strong for cheesecake. Period. Unless there's just a tiny amount of it. Foreshadowing, spoiler alert, whatever you want to call it, it's gonna happen. It's happening here in this pint. The base, I've had much saltier. I think it's good. I could actually say it's great. It's a darker, not overly bitter though, but by no means sweet. Maybe that's the salty pulling some of that sweetness away, but it's a good balance. Just enough salt. Salty, calling it a salty chocolate base is 100% fair. It's very good. Premium texture, creaminess is there, despite sitting in the freezer for 15 months. There's going to be chocolate everywhere by the end of this one. So we're talking about the chocolate over pound, the cheesecake chunks. Let's talk about those. They're pretty good size. I'm impressed. Texturally, wouldn't you know, fell off the spoon. Texturally, they're obviously not as soft, you know, spoon glides right through it. It's a little, it's not terrible, but it's a little firmer than that. It's almost like refrigerated cheesecake. Like it's been in the, I mean, I guess it's always served chilled. A little harder than chilled. Nice chew to it. The graham crust does freeze a little hard. That's expected, especially with a pint sitting this long. But it's by no means overly hard. Not breaking teeth, not rock hard. It's a denser, thicker chew. But the flavor, it just doesn't stand out. I mean, maybe if you were to eat it alone, but that's nearly impossible, obviously, with all the chocolate going on here. Maybe slightly tangy cheesecake vibe with the bigger chunks, but even then I think that's pushing it. The chocolate is just, it's too overpowering here. You can kind of see around the edges. It's a little, let's just call it gooier, and that's like your chocolate mousse. It's almost acting as like a swirl, but it's lighter, fluffier, almost like a pudding. That's a good way to put it. Almost like a pudding-like texture. The flavor is creamy, a sweeter chocolate for sure than the salty base, and it's a little richer, slightly richer than the base as well. So it's a nice addition because of the different, it's a contrast of chocolate flavors. There's some more cheesecake and graham for you. So you see plenty of mix-ins, but let's dig into the Oreo crust pieces. It's really hard to tell because it's essentially the same color of the base as the base, but it's, maybe you can tell texturally, it's got the Oreo cookie wafer, the wafer texture of it. It's kind of, I don't want to call it a brittle, but it's basically like a hardened Oreo wafer cookie. Easily, I'm gonna say the hardest mix in this ice cream. It kind of crumbles apart when your spoon hits it. I'm not getting a ton of flavor from it. And I think that's because it really just builds upon the type of darker bitterness in the base. I don't mind it here. I don't think it's necessary specifically for this ice cream. Texturally, it does add a little grit, a little crumb-like texture, so that is nice, different, nice change of pace. But as far as flavor, it kind of just meshes with the base. Here's the deal. This rating, it's irrelevant to how long it sat in my freezer. It's straightforward. What you see is what you get. What I taste is what you get. In general, I think anybody would have a tough time pulling this flavor off. Cheesecake tends to be a lighter flavor, whereas chocolate tends to be quite the opposite. Putting these two together, in my opinion, is almost a recipe for disaster. You're just kind of like playing with fire. So in summary, I don't want to say it's monotone because there are two different flavors of chocolates going on here, but it's heavy on the chocolate. It's chocolate forward for sure. And if you're going to call it cheesecake, it needs to have, you know, a heavier, in this case, cheesecake presence. Lolly's chocolate cheesecake gets a 6 out of 10.